After seeing Pikmin 4 to the credits, I had a thought. I wanted to share how I felt about the game, so I decided to make a video. I kept getting cold feet about it. This is a big game with a lot to say, so while the initial plan was just to make a casual video just talking about whatever I felt like off the top of my head, I decided to write a script instead, just to organize my thoughts. Nothing big. Then the script kept growing and growing, and I kept playing and playing as I was writing it out. Till now, where I basically visited every area of the entire game and have a 7-page script. That script, just of the areas that existed before the credits. Needless to say, I got my work cut out for me. I know the game's been out for at least a month by the time this comes out, but a little quick disclaimer for the people dodging spoilers. This video will be focused around the game before the credits, including how I felt about the game around that point. I'll mention my change of opinions since the post-game were appropriate, but since the majority of the script was written right as I finished the credits, my thoughts and feelings may not be perfectly accurate to how they are now about the game. This will be a generally free of spoiler review. I'll try to be as vague as possible with story beats, but I will be bringing up details on gameplay mechanics, some of the Pikmin you encounter, maybe even some enemies, the levels and worlds, both above and underground, and maybe even vague details on the characters introduced, up to the credits. All to better clarify the points that I'll be making throughout the video. So, while there will be no story spoilers in this video, if you haven't played up to the credits, and wish to experience the game as blind as possible on your own, then this is your warning. I might talk a little bit deeper about specifics and spoilers in the future, after I finish the game, but more detail on that near the end. Overall, Pikmin 4 has been an experience that I was very conflicted about going in, but I've warmed up to it the more I played, even if plenty of my initial critiques still stand. Ironically, the demo almost turned me off from the game altogether. The core gameplay is still the Pikmin people know and love, but that gameplay feels very different from the past, even with the very heavy Pikmin 2 inspirations sprinkled throughout the mix. For me, it's different for the better in some ways, but there's also others that lessen the experience for me. On the bright side, at least a few of these less desirable elements were ones that I warmed up to over time. It is also worth noting that I feel many of these changes were made in an attempt to get the game to be more accessible to a wider audience, which is not something I hold against the game. If anything, I want as many people to enjoy Pikmin as possible. I only bring all this up because I feel a lot of these issues will only bother you if you're a longtime fan of the series. And even then, I may be the exception rather than the rule. If this is your first Pikmin game, the qualms I have may actually be enjoyable improvements to you. Going into the demo, I immediately started to see what the creators meant by how they were planning on simplifying the game to make it more approachable. Even with that realization, I think getting used to those changes was still the biggest source of growing pain that I've had with the entire series. I think I would have rather got ambushed by half a dozen bomb rocks, a gallon of spiders, maybe even spiders with bomb rocks on them, followed by an eldritch horror from another dimension, than to try to get used to the changes to the controls. But that's only because I'm crazy enough to have already done that in a previous Pikmin game. Seriously though, in my humble opinion, they went a little too far in the simplistic direction. I could see what they were going for, but I feel like the new lock-on system took away too much agency. In rare cases, it would actually make it harder for me to aim. This was most noticeable in large horde of enemies, specifically the ticks that make your Pikmin panic, where I try to aim for one of them, but it would keep remaining locked on to another. While there is an option to change targets, it never felt like it was guaranteed to target the one that I actually wanted to, or at least do it fast enough. And in those situations in particular, I would have preferred to just manually aim with motion controls. It got better the more I played, but in the end I do still wish that there was an option to toggle between the two at the very least. It just felt like there was times that this new system took away too much freedom. Also, it hurts to say, but the cast of Pikmin 4 probably is the weakest in the entire series. More so in design, but it took a while to really gauge their personality, especially for how much they talk in this game. And while the post-game has helped me warm up to these characters, it's still not quite as good as the characters from Pikmin 1, 2, or 3. You can tell almost immediately that the majority of the new characters were made to fit a similar style as a character creator, if they weren't flat out made from said character creator, and I feel that hurts their design. Sure, I get that this game has more NPCs than any other Pikmin games, so I can imagine making a unique design for each of them would be a daunting task, but I still wish the main rescue corps, at the very least, got more distinct designs. It's kind of funny, cause usually when I have a problem with the character creators, it's that the main character doesn't fit in with the rest of the cast. But here, it kind of feels like the opposite, where everyone looks like the main character too much, and it feels like the design of the characters in the game were brought down to the quality of your avatar. Plus, it doesn't really feel like the Rescue Corps got a chance to be fleshed out, at least to the degree of past Pikmin games. They definitely got more fleshed out the later in the game you got, but for me it took until well past the credits to really start noticing that character. Captain Olimar is universally praised for the way that the game handles his characterization, and the rest of Pikmin 1 and 2's cast is equally iconic. Even though not as highly praised, I feel even Pikmin 3's captains got more chances for their characterization than Pikmin 4 gave its cast. In fact, I'm one of those people that actually enjoy Pikmin 3's characters. Elf, Brittany, and Charlie felt expressive and you really got to know them through the various interactions that they would have with each other, both within the game's various levels, and for various intermission conversations that they had back on the ship. It got even better in the deluxe release, where they brought back the Picopedia and gave each captain the chance to speak their mind about the enemies they faced. I can understand some feeling that it was more basic and in your face than the thought-provoking moments that Olimar would quietly have in the background, but for me, both were fun and enjoyable in their own way. Meanwhile, in Pikmin 4, it felt like there were a lot more cases of them just talking for the sake of talking, or to act as tutorials. Not to say that there weren't tutorializing moments in the previous Pikmin games, it just felt more fun the way that they expressed it. So it just came off to me as lacking the depth of Pikmin 1 and 2, but also the charm of Pikmin 3. I wouldn't even say that it was bad, despite what it seems, more like only okay in comparison. Which makes me even more salty about a certain thing they did for Pikmin 3 rep in the game. That's post-credit stuff, so I must constrain myself for now. The craziest part about all this is that characters from previous games that came back for this one were done better justice than the new casts. You get plenty of secondary material written by Captain Olimar, both between various logs written by Captain Olimar that you find throughout the main game, and slight spoilers to post-game stuff, through the returning Picopedia and treasure logs, which, slightly bigger spoilers, Olimar's perspective that he gives to them after you reach the credits. These moments are just as good at being entertaining while fleshing out character as they were in Pikmin 2. Too bad none of the Rescue Corps actually commentate on any of the collectibles you get or characters you fight against. That's not to say the Rescue Corps gets nothing. You do see an attempt to do something similar with the new cast, as you get various lordoms of Shepherd and their family line through similar logs, but for some reason it doesn't feel quite the same. As I alluded to before, I think it would help if some of the primary treasure logs and Picopedia entries were written from the perspective of someone that was actually part of the rescue crew, rather than having those being relegated exclusively to NPCs, whose impact in the story stops the moment after you rescue them. Those were things that helped flesh out the characters in the older Pikmin games, without overwhelming you with dialogue, and I think it would have gone a long way in fleshing out this game's cast. Speaking of NPCs regulated to the hub, I don't think the game's attempt at a hub world really clicked with me. I feel like the NPC interactions feel like things that could have been regulated to menus, both in-game and on the title screen. Maybe most people feel differently about this. I know I don't like saying it either, because I'm actually a fan of well-made hub worlds. When done right, they really flesh out the world of a game. However, I didn't really get that vibe with this one, especially when, in the past, the series has done so well with putting everything you need behind clean, organized menus. In this game, the menus feel so empty and plain. The music may be pretty, but the title screen itself feels like it lacks the personality of the past 2 games, but also isn't as beautiful as the third. It's weird because I feel most people adore the title screen, but I just don't get it. That being said, slight spoilers, there is a cute post-credits title screen that occasionally plays that I feel fixes the issue of lack of personality. I think regulating some of these features from the hub onto the title screen as you unlock them in game would help the menu and the main screen feel more full. Maybe I'm just missing all the side extra features that Pikmin 3 had. Kinda like how I felt about the characters. I wouldn't say navigating the hub world is bad. Everything you need, including the treasure log and the Picklepedia, is all close together and basically right in front of you. Plus you have a neat feature where you can fast travel to any NPC just by checking their ID from the menu. But a part of me still thinks that it would have worked to the game's benefit to just have some of these features regulated to menus. Well, since they can't think of a better place to bring it up, I'm still not quite sure what they were thinking with going from the fantastic co-op feature that they had in Pikmin 3 Deluxe into something that plays more similarly to Super Mario Galaxy. But I do feel it gets overhated. As a disclaimer, I have not had the opportunity to play the co-op. However, thanks to people that I already follow on YouTube, such as Steven Plays or the VisNomadic crew doing their own co-op playthroughs, I've seen quite a bit of that co-op. And I feel I've seen it in action long enough to make my best educated assumption about it. On its own, it's a solid co-op feature that lets a second player take part in a way that's impactful enough to be fun, but separated enough from the main gameplay to avoid overwhelming an unfamiliar player. Younger sibling mode is a perfect descriptor of it, though I do believe any player can have fun with it, especially on the more casual side. It will impact how much challenge you have on the game, of course. Many enemies, especially early on, can be obliterated with the co-op pointer alone. That's before you get the countless number of items that you'll stockpile on while playing as player 2. Items such as the bomb rocks have potential to cause chaos between players, but there will still be a noticeable drop in difficulty overall. Items already had a huge impact on the balance of the game when you had to spend valuable material to get them, yet the co-op mode is never shy with showering you in items. It assures that player 2 always has a meaningful way to impact the gameplay, but it does come at the cost of giving you more resources than you would normally ever need for a main playthrough. Overall, a fun addition as long as you don't take it too seriously. I can see how more veteran players of the series could get scared off by it, but it's a decent enough way to experience the game with a friend, or ease someone new into the series. There's plenty of games where a second player makes the game easier, so I feel this co-op gets way too much hate just because of that. The only reason this co-op mode feels so underwhelming is because of how well fleshed out the co-op was in Pikmin 3. Of course, this is never going to live up to you and a friend each controlling a captain, but I don't want saying that to take away the enjoyment that this co-op mode has on its own merits. Even when playing the game on its own, I felt myself craving a bit more on the challenge side of things. So co-op alone isn't to blame for the game's balance. So let's talk a bit more about the game's difficulty. Despite being based off Pikmin 2, you can tell that the developers really worked hard to assure that the complaints people had with Pikmin 2 wouldn't be repeated in this one. Caves are a lot more fair and balanced, especially compared to their Pikmin 2 counterparts. Yet, something feels missing. I am a firm believer that fairness and challenge are not the same thing, so I feel I'm able to put my nostalgic feelings aside towards the unfair elements of Pikmin 2 caves in order for there to be a game that's fun for all fans rather than a select few. That said, they definitely feel more fair, but now there's something missing. It's something that's hard for me to put into words. I guess it feels like there's so many little elements adding up to something that feels a bit too far in the other direction. The most apparent example I can think of is how much more slowly the stalagmites and icicles fall from the sky in this game. For the sake of fairness, I agree they should at least fall slow enough to give players plenty of time to react to them, but the current speed that they fall feels a bit too slow. It feels too slow to ever be a serious threat. Again, it's impossible for me to grasp, let alone explain all the examples like this. but it's little things like that that add up over the course of the full game. Pikmin 2 was too brutal, I get that, but to me it feels like they overcompensated in the other direction for this game. At least based on what I've played up to the credits. It's most apparent in caves that were heavily inspired from Pikmin 2, where the new version felt so toned down from the original that it came off lackluster or a watered down version of what I was already familiar with. Maybe part of it is looking at the game the wrong way, because it's a feeling that I felt less the deeper I got into the game, therefore the game doing a successful job at having a difficulty curve. It's just hard to tell if they are actually too easy now, or it just feels that way. I am better with Pikmin now than when I first got into Pikmin 2, and there has been quality of life improvements that took out padding that I might have mistaken as part of the game's challenge in the past. This is not to say that I didn't have fun in any of the caves. There were plenty of caves with interesting puzzles to solve and areas to explore. In 4's favor, I think abandoning the randomly generating elements from Pikmin 2 was the right choice. It had this charm with each playthrough of the cave feeling different, but I think this allows the cave's design to be much more purposeful and therefore memorable. A lot of my qualms come down to how Pikmin 2 forced me to value all my resources and carefully plan my decisions, and yet I rarely felt that same pressure in Pikmin 4. They overall feel smaller, both in numbers of floors and areas to explore, something that might be a setback to me, but at the same time I can see it having benefit to other players. Again, it's hard for me to gauge how much the quality of life features have impacted this as well, but even if it did have some impact, that doesn't mean I want them to get rid of those features. For example, fast travel between levels of a cave after you complete it is a huge quality of life feature that I want to stay. The lack of pressure of trying to get everything in one sweep does take away from some of the challenge, but it also alleviates so much tedium that was present in Pikmin 2. Never forget the frustration Pikmin 2 players went through, going through like 20 floors of a cave multiple times just to grind out enough purple Pikmin to get that one single treasure in the quote-unquote post-game. And then there's the rewind feature. Restarting the day, or even a bad floor of a cave, just to squeeze out a slightly better performance out of it, has been a natural part of my gameplay style since I first played Pikmin 1 on the GameCube. I've done this so much over the course of the series and my life that it's essentially hardwired into me. That strive to retry something until I do it efficiently enough to be happy with it is what makes Pikmin as a series so special to me. Plus, I strongly argue that Pikmin 2 is built in a way that expects you to take advantage of resetting between the autosaves on every floor and the way it handles the challenge. So I love the rewind feature that Pikmin 4 introduced. My only complaint is that it's not a literal save state and resets everyone back to base, regardless on where you were in that moment. There were times that this was a harsher punishment than just resetting, which I didn't mind, but there was also occasions that I would actually gain progress out of rewinding, which to me defeats the whole purpose of resetting. I wanted to redo the scenario from fresh, with all the advantages and disadvantages that I had in that particular moment. It didn't feel like I was replaying a scenario to do it better in those situations. It felt like I just flat out cheesed it. Besides that quirk, this is one of my favorite additions to the series. It's a quality of life feature that feels like it was made just for me. Still feels more natural and fun than manually resetting, and I feel it will especially enhance future playthroughs, where I strive to beat the game in as few days as possible, in a similar vein to how I replay Pikmin 1 through 3. Honestly, I wasn't even planning on bringing up the rewind feature and just leaving it be, but I have the feeling that if I don't bring it up, someone in the comments eventually will. So I want to make it clear that I not only don't mind the feature, but that it actively makes the game more fun for me. If you don't like it and feel that it takes away from your experience with the game, simply don't use it. I understand the perspective of people who want to play the games without resets. Unlike Pikmin 2, caves aren't designed like ISO levels. So it makes perfect sense that you would want to play the game in a way where you have to adapt based on the mistakes you make along the way. All I ask is you respect the way that I or anyone else wants to play the game as well. Ironically enough, most of my complaints regarding the rewind feature is that it's exclusive for the day that you're playing on. And between that and the autosaves, once you progress to a new game, you can never go back to the previous one. Unlike Pikmin 2, autosaves quickly have become my worst enemy. Well, excluding the loading times, but more on that later. The autosaves haven't really been a huge issue after getting the full game. I think it's just that I haven't forgiven the game from screwing me out of getting the blue onion early in my demo playthrough. I picked the wrong upgrade for Oachi, only to realize I need a different one after the game autosave. Autosave is a feature that I normally don't mind for casual gameplay, but in combination with a lack of way to undo mistakes you make in the hub world, it just rubbed me the wrong way. With the overall structure of Pikmin 4, I can see why this wouldn't be an issue for most people. But with all the time I spent between the Wii remakes of 1 and 2, along with Pikmin 3, I missed the Dave Select feature. For me, it allowed for a lot of self-expression that reflected my gameplay style. So I hope I made it clear that I'm more than willing to sacrifice elements that artificially added challenge to the game in exchange for quality of life features that make the series more fun for more players. It especially helps that a lot of these features are situations where if you don't like it, you can just not use it or ignore it. For example, my gameplay style may be pretty reset heavy, but I make up for it by trying to do every cave in a single sweep. In fact, there has not been a single cave yet, both pre-credits and post-credits, that I haven't done in one sitting, or at least without leaving and coming back in. So if you don't like the fact that you can leave a cave and then come back to exactly where you left off, just don't do it. There's nothing stopping me from doing an entire dungeon in one sweep if I want to. The only difference is now others who would get frustrated by that sort of experience no longer have to suffer. I just wish there was more options for players that wanted a deeper test of their skills. The return of Ultra Spicy mode, a DLC of extra hard challenges, in-game and or through Dandori challenges. Anything that would allow players to squeeze a little more challenge out of the game, if they so desire. If that never happens though, maybe I can get that extra challenge by approaching the game in a different way. Plus, I'm probably speaking too soon. As I play more and more of the post-credits of the game, I might just get that wish. Worst, and definitely least, is the game's loading times. I think this was the single biggest factor that made me question my decision to purchase the game after playing the demo. Loading times has always been my biggest source of frustration in gaming, even more than performance-related issues that I get under other people's skin, such as level of graphics or frame rate. Sometimes it felt like I was spending way more time staring at a black screen than I was actually playing the game. They averaged just shy of half a minute. Occasionally I'd be lucky enough to get one that was closer to 15 seconds for something like a small cave, but even when they're short, they sure do feel like they take forever. With the game needing to load for the start of every level, every floor of a cave, for basically every cutscene, and every time I rewind time, those loading times added up very quickly. I could probably go on for way too long about all my complaints and nitpicks, yet despite everything, I got a lot of fun out of the game. This is the most that I've been invested into a single game since the release of Pokemon Legends. It helps that despite everything, Pikmin 4 is still Pikmin at its core, featuring all the elements that made past games so fun, while also stepping in a new direction that adds something fresh that still complements the core gameplay. I may have gripes with some changes, however, those changes are still an overall net positive. It helps that many of my complaints are either nitpicks or elements that I think would actually enhance gameplay for me if this was my first entry into the series. First of all, presentation for the game as a whole lives up to the high quality standard the rest of the series has. Even my previous critiques of the title screen and the character design fail to come close to affecting the visual and audio quality of the game. Pikmin has always thrived on natural, beautiful areas, and this game is no exception. Adding more urban areas to explore brings a well-needed addition to the diversity of Pikmin environments. I feel like the house area got a bit overhyped, but I appreciate them adding diversity to the game's environments enough to overlook that. Plus, there's still plenty of all-natural areas to keep the urban areas from overstaying their welcome. Now, overall, this doesn't impact my feelings on the game, but I do find it funny. It does throw a curveball into what the heck is going on with this game's lore, but the levels are fun, and at the end of the day, that's what matters most. Nintendo has always been a company to put gameplay first, and then implement lore where it's convenient, so it's not really worth losing sleep over if some things are nonsensical. The Pikmin themselves are as charming as ever, and the canine pal Oachi fits right into the vibe of the Pikmin characters. Way better than I was expecting even. I'll be honest, having a dog instead of multiple captains was odd at first, but it didn't take long for me to appreciate what Oachi added to the series, both in terms of personality and in gameplay. Pup Drive added a lot of freedom and customization that I didn't realize the series needed until I saw that direct presentation. You get to tailor Oachi based on the gameplay elements you value most. Having a character that acts both as a Pikmin and a captain may seem overpowered at first, and there's definitely an argument for it being so at times. But I feel that the game does a great job making their gameplay distinct enough, yet similar enough, to add a different level of depth that was just as engaging if not more so. Oachi and your character share the same core essentials a captain needs to use the Pikmin. Yet, each have their own distinct skills that can favor having one over another for a certain area. There's even situations where you're at an advantage keeping them together due to their distinct abilities working well together as a team. In every other Pikmin game, I always felt encouraged to divide up my captains as much as possible to efficiently clear tasks. But minus some exceptions in Pikmin 3 that require captain throwing, this is the first game where I had a strong reason to keep the pair together, as well as divide to conquer where appropriate. Between Pup Drive and the lab system, there's so much freedom and replayability Pikmin 4 offers, just by allowing you to get these abilities in different orders. Speaking of the lab, that feels like a natural evolution of how players got upgrades in Pikmin 2 and 3. Not only are there certain upgrades tied to certain treasures you collect via Pikmin 2, you can also choose which ones to prioritize based on the order you buy them with the materials you collect. I think material is perfectly balanced in Pikmin 4. I got a healthy amount through natural exploration and side quests, but it was never quite enough to buy everything right away. Same with Pup Drive. Never quite got enough to get everything right away, forcing me to choose what to prioritize. Tying Pup Drive to people you rescue, and having the rescues tied exclusively to caves, was a great choice. I never minded the end goal of a cave being a random treasure in the past, but this new system gives something much more distinct to being a cave, and it allows the treasures within a cave to be more focused as a reward for exploring it, rather than just clearing it. Freedom of exploration and expression are elements that Pikmin 4 has in spades. The worlds are vast, and the game gives you plenty of tools for non-linearity. On top of the Pup Drive and lab systems that I've already mentioned, the game's worlds themselves are built in a way to assure you get access to the essentials needed to beat the game, regardless of how much time you spend in each world. There are multiple onions for blue and yellows to assure that you don't have to go to one particular area just to get the classic 3. And caves are generous enough to give you whatever Pikmin you need, but don't have, in order to clear them. This not only assures that you have what you need to beat caves, or do enough in an area to move on to the next, but it offers multiple paths along the journey to beat the game itself. Onions for all other types are tied to late game, if not flat out post-game areas, forcing you to focus on different objectives if you happen to skip an area. For example, I went through the entire pre-credit portion of the game without seeing a single winged Pikmin, and I just barely ran into purples and whites. While this did leave me confused at times and a little annoyed that I didn't get to use them enough, I do appreciate how my Pikmin journey may vastly differ from my peers, due to us taking different paths in our journey. Plus, after the credits, these rare Pikmins become more common, and I actually started using Oachi's tracking skills, so lack of certain Pikmin types was no longer an issue. Lacking certain Pikmin types wasn't the only time I started missing the more linear structure of the games, but I do appreciate the change of pace. Speaking of onions, the Firelight system was an interesting choice to implement into the game. On one hand, being stripped away of my 100 Pikmin max that I would have in any other game was rough to adjust to, but I do appreciate what they were going for. Pikmin 4 does fall into that trap a little that games like Metroid or other sequels have an upgrade system. You know, the whole trope of stripping away abilities that you would normally start out with, in order to build yourself up to something even more powerful. Thankfully, most of these standard abilities you can get back real quickly and for cheap. They even brought back the form from Pikmin 1 and 2, allegedly. Somehow when writing this script, despite being really close to 100%, even doing what I considered the post-credit ending, I don't want to spoil too much, but if you played Pikmin 2, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because it's the exact same concept. Anyways, yeah, I've done so much of the game and I've yet to stumble upon this feature, minus a certain side mode you unlock shortly after the credits. The point being, they really make you work for getting full access to your maximum Pikmin count, more than any other upgrade in the game. Eventually I got used to not having a full squad, which allowed me to have a level of gameplay, an additional challenge that I wouldn't have gotten if I started out with 100 Pikmin max right from the beginning. At that point, getting a new Farlick and increasing my max count felt like a genuine reward rather than something I should have had from the start. It's enough to make me ponder if the series should stick with this going forward. That's a crazy thought, because pre-Pikmin 4, if you were to told me that you're going to take away my 100 Pikmin max, I probably would have been infuriated. Yet in this game, they found a way to make it work so well, I'm pondering if it always should have been that way. Part of the non-linear structure that's easy to take for granted are the rescues. Instead of having the same Castaway be set to a specific location, for example, you'll always gain the Scientist Russ as your first Castaway, and stumbled on the solo explorer Dingo after rescuing a few civilians castaways, including those that unlock access to the treasure log and Picopedia. I feel like there's some exceptions, but I can't quite put my finger on it. They could have made these people you rescue tied to specific areas, making you prioritize certain castaways for certain features, and that would have made a different yet interesting gameplay structure. Yet I appreciate the way that they decided to handle it, as it assures you're never left too long without the next plot thread, even if you have no idea which caves lead to which castaways. So that was probably the better choice for a wider range of people. It also helps that they did an insane job giving purpose to so many of the castaways, especially considering how huge the number of castaways there are in this game. The variety of side missions and features tied behind them were so vast and varied that I didn't really start running into castaways that didn't have much to do until near the end of my playthrough. You have features like the Picopedia, treasure log, and even the ability to replay Dandori battles / challenges, and that's not even topping the half of it. While I did express my earlier confliction about how some of these features used would have been perfectly fine as menu options, it does at least give me incentive to rescue as many people as I can. Other castaways have side quests tied to earning material. Side quests in Pikmin felt weird at first, but they did a good job at making these quests tied to things that you would normally be doing in the game anyways, such as growing and blooming Pikmin, collecting treasures, rescuing people, and the like. There was always incentive to rescue more people because I never knew what exactly they unlock on the hub. Even with my post-credits playthrough, I'm still stumbling upon new features as I continue to rescue the remaining castaways. It's especially interesting as you rescue the leaflings, as it's actually a two-step process. First, completing either a Dandori challenge or Dandori battle. Second, you have to find the cure for them. Despite the differences in name, these Dandori diversions are actually features that existed in previous Pikmin games, now integrated into the main story. The Dandori challenges basically are mission mode from Pikmin 3, and the battles are Battle Bingo from 2 and 3. While I still miss the fact that mission mode isn't its own thing anymore, I do appreciate the fact that they found a way to integrate them into the story. With Battle Bingo previously being a multiplayer exclusive feature, it gives me more opportunity to actually play it. You can still even do the battles from the main menu like in past games, and even give yourself an option to play with the CPU that they use from the single player adventure. After rescuing the leaflings, you still have to cure them though, which is where we finally get to talk about the nighttime missions. As I speculated in my direct video, nighttime missions are a separate thing from the main game, so no extending a day into night hours to pick up a couple more things. This is his own thing, baby. From what I've played so far is nice, though I won't say much on it for now, because it's something I didn't really dive that deep into until the post-credits portion of my playthrough. And even then, I still have quite a bit to do before I've done everything I can with the nighttime missions. It's basically tower defense, using the glow Pikmin to fight off enemies in order to protect their homes. Their homes also produce an ingredient you need to cure the leaflings, so it's a win-win for both you and the glow Pikmin. So far, they've been a fun little diversion when I need a palate cleanser from the main game. I do also like the fact that the exploration you make in the day will impact your gameplay at night, so it's to your advantage to wait until you clear all the shortcuts and alternative paths in the world before taking on their night missions, since I've only done a handful of them, and this review is already huge as is. I think I'll talk more about it later, after I finish playing the rest of the game, and have a chance to try out the night mode's more tricky challenges. So, overall, Pikmin 4 is great. I have plenty of conflicting feelings about the changes that the game has made, but it's not enough to stop me from having fun with it. Again, there's a few growing pains to get used to for veterans of the series, but I think this is a great entry point into the series, as well as being well worth the 10-year break for its longtime fans. It gave me so much, and yet I'm still craving more. I can only hope Nintendo sees the success of this game and decides to add on to it. Whether it be an extra difficulty option, new Dandori battles / challenges to try, or even a DLC area. I know it's crazy, but I can dream. One last thing to close off the video. Wow, the credits were beautiful. Refraining from spoilers, but that ending made me realize exactly what the hype behind post-credit scenes in Marvel movies were all about. It was that level of hype. I could go on, but I've already talked about this way more than I planned. Overall, this review reflects how I feel about the game as I reach the credits, but since this took so long to write and I've played quite a bit more of the game as I was writing it, I did try to update this review to reflect those more recent thoughts, but I'm sure there's some feelings I missed, especially critical critiques that aren't nearly as critical now. I might even end up enjoying this game even more by the time this review is out, let alone by the time I finish 100%ing it. If I had all the time in the world, I would promise a follow-up, but this review in itself has been really time consuming as is, and I want to ensure that I still leave myself time for other projects I've been working on. So, let me see how I feel after I get this out for all of you. Until then, take care.